Welcome to the final round of Big Questions Debate, a debate format supported by a grant from the John Templeton Foundation. This year, students have grappled with complex worldview questions as they debate both sides of the topic. Resolved, creativity is a more powerful force than intelligence. Thanks to the generosity of the John Templeton Foundation, the NSDA has been given over $1.5 million to speech and debate programs since 2016, while creating opportunities for students to debate topics at the intersection of science, philosophy, and theology. Now to introduce our esteemed judging panel. Starting from my left, a two-diamond coach and district chair from Ben Davis High School in Indiana, Gary Peters. A coach and 2024 BQ Final Round judge from Canyon Crest Academy in California, Stella Sung. A one-diamond coach and two-time national qualifier and a board member of the Florida Debate Initiative, where he was named the most valuable coach in the state of Florida, who serves as Director of Forensics at Lincoln Middle School and Eastside High School in Florida, Marna Weston. A five-diamond coach who has coached multiple national finalists and is an incoming committee member for the New England District, from Needham High School in Massachusetts, PJ Wexler. Assistant coach and alumnus for Isidore Newman High School in Louisiana, Anthony Burial. A one-diamond coach who is the vice president of the Sagebrush League from Reno, Nevada, Amanda Guffey. Coach of multiple national and state qualifiers from Grapevine High School in Texas, DeMarcus Powell. A one-diamond coach of multiple state champions and national qualifiers from Horace High School in North Dakota, Kathleen Bolstead. And a six-diamond coach from Garden City High School in Kansas, Russ Tidwell. Thank you to all of our judges. At this time, I would like to invite up to the stage tournament official Han Do, who will introduce the debate.
Thank you. We started Monday morning with 159 Big Questions debaters, and now we're down to the final two. Before we begin, I'd like to share my appreciation to the John Templeton Foundation for sponsoring the Big Questions competition, and to all those individuals who made this Big Questions division of the NSDA tournament so successful. Thank you to my fellow coaches who have worked tirelessly in our tab room. Those are Joe Vaughn, Cheryl Kazmarek, Adesua Amari, Dr. Lamont Howard, and Dr. Colleen Mooney Coughlin. The resolution being debated today is resolved. Creativity is a more powerful force than intelligence. Our debaters today on the affirmative, code 204, and on the negative, code 223. Congratulations to both debaters for making it to the final stage, and good luck. You may begin.
Is anyone not ready? Then time will begin on my first word. I affirm the resolution, creativity is a more powerful force than intelligence, because creativity ultimately takes the step necessary for change to occur. First, a few definitions. Creativity is defined by Britannica as the ability to make or otherwise bring into existence something new. Powerful is defined by the Cambridge Dictionary as having power to control people and events. The word than is explained by Oxford Languages is used to introduce the second element in a comparison. Intelligence is defined by Oxford Languages as the ability to learn or understand. And finally, force is defined by Merriam-Webster as the cause of motion or change. Judges, we should look at this debate from a humanistic perspective, which makes the definition of a powerful force more tangible. The affirmative job is to prove that creativity has a larger impact on humans and society than intelligence, and the negation has to prove the inverse. An observation, the resolution specifically utilizes the term than, denoting a comparison between creativity and intelligence. Thus, we do not need to prove that one has no importance, we simply need to look at which one has a greater impact. Contention 1 is the creative economy. The creative economy's novel inventions foster economic growth. European Central in 617 finds that innovation can lead to higher productivity, meaning that the same input generates a greater output, more goods and services are produced, and the economy grows. New ideas and technologies are developed, and innovation brings vast benefits for consumers and businesses. Wages of workers increase, they have more money and can buy more goods and services. In turn, businesses become more profitable, which enables them to invest and hire more employees. This leads us to two impacts. First is economic crisis. Without creativity, there are no new ideas and technologies developed, meaning that progress is zeroed. People aren't hired, wages aren't paid, and the world crumbles overnight. Frank 18 finds that economic crises hinder quality of life, increase unemployment, and result in instability and mass protest that can negatively impact mental and physical health. Throughout economic crises, HIV rates increase, individuals are thrust into poverty, and healthcare is paradoxically sacrificed. Inequality is responsible for 1 in 3 deaths, meaning millions die absent creativity. Berchuska 14 writes that the higher mortality is an example of structural violence. The factor most responsible for poor health is rising inequality in wealth and income. Studies confirm that all criteria for linking inequality to poor health are met, and 1 death in 3 results from inequality. Inequality kills through structural violence. The second impact is the climate. A strong, innovative economy is key to combat increased warming. Bailey 25 explains that economic growth spurs innovation and creates cheaper and more efficient technologies. And whatever slows down economic growth will also slow down environmental cleanup and renewal. Climate change kills hundreds of thousands yearly. Schneider-Meyerson 15 writes that this slow violence is already tangible. 300,000 people already perish every year as a result of anthropogenic climate change, and 300 million are negatively affected. It disproportionately affects the marginalized. Climate change will ultimately stand among the most egregious collective acts of injustice in history. Sans creativity, hundreds of thousands die while our world crumbles. That makes it undoubtedly a more powerful force than intelligence, as rejection of creativity means that we can never create new solutions to existing problems. Contention 2 is progress. Creativity is the driving force of progress because it creates knowledge, thus expanding our intelligence of the world. Dan 08 shows that creativity is the highest form of intelligence because it goes beyond knowledge recall and extends into knowledge creation. Let's look at calculus. Newton had to think, what if I arrange these variables in a specific orientation? That imagination results in the creation of all knowledge that exists today, passed on from generation to generation. Subpoint B is the learning process. The learning process is a key way in which a society evolves, and creativity is key to this process. More specifically, mistakes are key. According to Rothenberg 19, creative people have an orientation to error that is out of the ordinary. Although creative work itself is almost always quite difficult and highly fraught with error, creative people characteristically deal with errors and mistakes in a different way. While engaged in the creative process, they think in a highly free and wide-ranging fashion, and they take risks and chances that invariably lead to error. The learning process requires the identification of a mistake to then draw upon knowledge and come up with a creative solution. Effectively, mistakes are the entropy in life, that randomness, those mistakes, and without these mistakes, there's nothing that would be to learn from, thus making the learning process non-existent. Now, without learning, there is no evolution, as we are stuck in the same cycle of falling victim to these same problems over and over again without being able to find new solutions. The impact is a stagnant society, where we are unable to grow, both as a collective and as inherently creative individuals. For the reasons above, we affirm.
All right, and once again, this is code 223 on the negation. And is anybody not ready? All right, then my time begins in 3, 2, 1. I stand in strong negation of resolved creativity as a more powerful force than intelligence. For clarity, I define intelligence from Cambridge Dictionary as the ability to learn, understand, and make judgments or have opinions that are based on reason. Cambridge importantly notes that intelligence is a general ability to solve problems. Note one important thing here. Intelligence goes beyond replication of knowledge and encompasses the creation of knowledge through deduction and induction. Then, creativity from Oxford Dictionary as the use of the imagination or original ideas, and finally, powerful from Oxford Dictionary as the ability to exert influence or change. Thus, the framework in today's round is assessing the scope of influence for both cognitive functions. If I prove either that creative impacts are supported by intelligence or that intelligence is the necessary backbone for human influence, the negation wins on scope. Contention 1, intelligence is required for creativity. This is for two main reasons. First, intelligence is the base for the intake of information and thus is needed for creativity. According to NCBI 10, intelligence is a general mental ability for reasoning, problem solving, and learning. Because of its general nature, intelligence integrates cognitive functions such as perception, attention, memory, language, and planning. These are absolute skills for building a foundational base of ideas. All of the following are defined by Oxford Dictionary. Perception, the ability to see, hear, or become aware of something. Attention, notice taken of something or someone, the regarding of someone or something as interesting or important. Memory, the faculty by which the mind stores and remembers information. Language, the principal method of human communication. And planning, the process of making plans for something. These 5 skills are not only essential to the human experience, but are also essential in order to even be creative. These necessarily connect with creative thought and expression. With no normative experience, no idea would be conceptually possible. Connecting to the material world is a prerequisite for creativity. Without perception, attention, memory, language, and planning, without intelligence, no act of creativity could ever be achieved. Second, intelligence as a psychological condition is necessary for the existence of creativity. Gerwig et al. 21 relates that idea generation appears to be a result of focused internal attention combined with controlled semantic retrieval, facets of intelligence. Further, Kowalski et al. 16 finds through 8 individual studies examining intelligence and creativity that intelligence is a necessary condition for the existence of creativity. As such, 3 studies, Cox 1926, Plucker et al. 15, and Simonton 14, accentuate that it is hardly possible to make an impact in any domain of human functioning, especially in the creative domain, without a substantial amount of intelligence. This leads Kaufman et al. 16 to relate that intellect predicts creative achievement in science-related domains. Without intelligence, creative thought is impossible, meaning that any creative impact is ultimately supported by intelligence. Without the skills and cognitive function provided by intelligence, creativity has no impacts. Without unique impacts, creativity can never be the more powerful entity. Contention 2, intelligence impacts both people and society. Subpoint A, people. Both the survival and development of individuals require intelligence. Intelligence encompasses understanding our environment and our needs, then applying problem solving to survive effectively. Botel et al. 23, a meta-analysis, finds that results show a positive relationship between intelligence and survival. Quantifiably, Hamburg 15 relates that just 15 IQ points predicates a 21% greater chance of survival to the age of 76. The ability to understand and problem solving is necessary to survive and definitively important for humanity. In fact, survival paves the way to every other human impact. But intelligence also provides for our development. IC 25 posits that understanding social roles, reading emotions, comprehending relationships, and effective listening are some of the social intelligence skills. These skills are essential for humans to be able to effectively develop beliefs and connections. Henderson et al. 08 corroborates. Understanding others' intentions is important to people's daily functioning and fundamental to the process of learning from others. Barbosa 23 furthers that intelligence helps humans to express themselves clearly, utilize language skillfully, and understand sophisticated linguistic systems. In fact, without intelligence, we would not be able to communicate at all, as Wallinga et al. 14 finds that our vast intelligence also allows us to have language. Subpoint B, societies. Progress requires problem-solving meaning rather than true originality. Walda 22 finds that national intelligence is considered a condition for the sustainability of any country due to it allowing effective utilization of the economic, political, military, and diplomatic powers. Further, Stolter et al. 23 relates that problem solving is the source of all new functions, and thus I negate. Thank you, and I'm open to cross.
As first speaker, may I have the first question? Great, I will start cross in 3, 2, 1. Great, can we address your subpoint B contention 2 about society?
Sure.
On this subpoint, are you claiming that intelligence is necessary to have societal development or simply to have societies in the first place?
I would say both, because understanding allows us to have a society that is necessary, but then problem solving allows us to progress in a society. You don't have progression without society. May I have a question?
Go ahead.
Okay. Is power premised on impact as per your observation?
Great, so our observation is saying that to make this debate measurable for the judges and to make it easier for us to argue, we are measuring the power and the force of each side on the impact on humans and society.
All right.
Okay. May I have a question? Mm-hmm. Great. So you argue that intelligence is a prerequisite to any amount of creativity. Now, my question here is, are we measuring the origin of something or the impact? As your observation also noted that we need to measure which is the impact and see the scope of the impact.
I'd say we're measuring both, because intelligence both allows us to have creativity as a psychological condition and allows the methodological implementation of any creative idea. So intelligence both provides for creativity and allows for the implementation of any creative idea.
Great. Can I have a follow-up?
You can have a follow-up after I take a question.
Go ahead.
If I only have the idea in my head, does that actually impact the world?
Great. So the definition and the framework that we have provided is that it needs to impact humans and society. Now, the definition of force we provided was the cause of motion or change, meaning that even if the change only occurs with the person who thought of the creative idea, that is still an impact on society. Rather than drawing from prior intelligence and applying the same thing over and over, a creative solution, even if it only impacts one person, still has an impact. May I have the follow-up?
Yeah.
Have you provided a specific definition for force?
No, I have not, but we are premising the round on which is a more powerful force. Power is premised on either influence or impact.
Great, thank you. You can have a question.
All right, what makes calculus powerful?
Great. So the impact of calculus comes from the change, and change originated from the idea. It's not from drawing on prior knowledge of mathematics that we already had. It was the creation of the new thought of calculus. Even without spreading that knowledge, that impact was created on one person. And we are measuring where that impact occurs. Whether or not that impact was spread does not matter. We are seeing where that impact occurs and what caused that motion and change. May I have a question?
Sure.
Great. You say that intelligence is necessary to survival, and to this you give the example of how people use emotional intelligence. Now, how is emotional intelligence useful if you can't come up with solutions for those emotions?
I'd like to differentiate something first. I say survival as an individual point and then emotional development, but emotional development is going to support humans in their influence, and survival is allowed by our understanding of our environment and needs and then problem solving off of that.
Great, thanks. I will be taking running prep now. Prep ceased at 15 seconds. Is the official timekeeper okay with that? Then, if everybody is ready, time will begin on my first word. Judges, let's first begin with a brief overview. We have both agreed that we need to evaluate this debate on the impact of humans and society. With that in mind, let's move on to my opponent's contention 1. In this contention, they say that intelligence is required for creativity. The entire premise of this argument is that intelligence is a prerequisite. Unfortunately, in this debate, we are not arguing about prerequisites. We are arguing about what has the actual impact on society. This is the burden that both of us have provided in our constructives, meaning that you are going to to evaluate what has the impact. And what does have the impact, you may ask? Is it the past knowledge that we draw on, or the creativity that comes up with the new solution? Unfortunately, in a society where you evaluate intelligence as the most powerful force, the only impact we see on society is effectively nothing, because you are drawing on the same knowledge over and over again and applying the same thing, meaning we see no variation, meaning existing problems don't have new solutions. All we get is the same solutions. Next, in a world with creativity that uses old knowledge to come up with new solutions, this is called lateral thinking. And lateral thinking is essential to today's society. You can cross-apply our contention one about the creative economy and innovation on this, proving that we need lateral thinking and innovation to survive. Next, my opponent says that intelligence is necessary for the existence of creativity. Again, judge, you are not evaluating the existence of something, you are evaluating the impact of said force. And we can clearly see that there is no impact that intelligence has without a creative solution to apply in the first place. Additionally, they say that intelligence is the need to connect to the material world. To this, we say that creativity is what has the impact on material world. Again, it is the actual solution. Identifying a problem and using past knowledge to apply to it isn't going to solve anything. We give you the example of climate change in our speech. Climate change exists. I know that because I have the knowledge to identify that. But with the only past knowledge that I have, there's no proper solution that I can apply to this. Creativity and lateral thinking is what is needed to be able to come up with a solution to this. And because of creativity, we are currently mitigating climate change in the status quo. That's how creativity works, coming up with new solutions to old problems. Next, let's move on to my opponent's contention too. They say that intelligence equals survival. First of all, in this scenario, my opponent is assuming that nothing exists in the world apart from intelligence and creativity. This is inherently incorrect. Survival is based on instincts. Babies are born into this world with the lowest IQ. They give you the example of how someone with the base IQ has a 20-something% chance of higher survival. This fact means nothing in this debate because we are impacting, first, the impact on human society. Second of all, if we're only basing it on survival, then one, society will never progress, and two, that's not having any impact on day-to-day life. That is simply survival, and surviving is not enough for society. Next, let's move on to where they say they read emotions and that intelligence helps people communicate. To this, we say that just because I know someone is having a bad day doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to help them. I can know that my friend is having a bad day, but I don't get to solve that unless I use my creativity to come up with a solution to hug him or to watch a TV show with him. In fact, this argument is turned over to the affirmative because creativity helps us communicate in day-to-day life, and that helps us connect with people. On their subpoint C about society, they say that intelligence provides the understanding needed to form societies. To this, we say that even if we take their argument about language, language is inherently a creative idea. That is proven because that idea comes from someone. My opponent argues that a creative idea has no impact and let it spread. Judge, we are evaluating the impact on humans in society. Even if I am the only one with the idea, I am part of society, meaning I still have an impact in this debate. And it is what is the cause of motion or change. The creative idea is the change that comes first. It is the cause. Next, they say that problem solving works. Intelligence only applies solutions, creativity creates them. Thus, we affirm.
I'll be taking running prep beginning now. Can I have that as 35 seconds? Let me jot that down real quick. All right, and then for a quick off-time roadmap, this will be framing, then defending my case, and then on to attacking my opponents. Great, is anybody not ready? Then my time begins in 3, 2, 1. The most important thing at the top of my case is that my opponent never addresses the fact that we're weighing under scope of influence. Let's go into why that matters. In my contention 1, I tell you intelligence is needed for creativity. Their most important response here is we're not arguing about prerequisites, but their entire framing of the debate is that the initial cause is going to be the most powerful thing. Insofar as intelligence is a prerequisite to creativity, they concede that that's going going to be the initial cause of creativity. That should win the negation, the round, just in general. But then they try to cross-apply creative economy. We'll get to that. They tell you need to evaluate the impact, but the impact is always going to come from intelligence, allowing for the basis of creativity. And then they tell you creativity has the impact, but insofar as intelligence supports this impact, it's also going to be an impact of intelligence. Then let's go down to my contention 2, where I tell you intelligence is needed for humanity. On my subpoint A about people, they tell you that survival comes from instinct, but they never address the fundamental warrant here. They define intelligence as understanding, as do I. We need to understand our needs and our environment to problem solve effectively off of that, or use creativity off of that. Then they tell you that survival has no day-to-day impact, but insofar as their own framing of the round is looking to the origin of impact, it has the origin of any other impact. Then on social intelligence, they tell you you can only impact through creative ideas, but understanding and problem solving is going to allow for this actionability in the first place. Then on my subpoint B about societies, they just tell you creativity is the cause, but remember intelligence provides for creativity here. Then onto their case. On their observation about looking to impact, we should be looking to both impact and prerequisite, which means we care about implementation and the initial cause. With that, let's go into their contention 1. On their warrant here about innovation, I tell you 2 things. The first is that proper implementation of creative innovation is only through intelligence. Reasonable uses of innovative solutions only come through reasoning and an understanding of real-world needs. But then secondly, I tell you to look to the actual empirics, because Wilson et al. 14 explains that using US state-level data, net of other factors, high IQ states are more innovative. My opponent can throw as many generalities as I'd like at you, but this is the only empirical link between either intelligence and creativity to innovation in today's round. And then let's look to their impact on economy. There's 3 things here. The first is going to come from a WALDA 22, which I read off to you in my subpoint B of contention 2 in case, which tells you that national intelligence is considered for a condition of the sustainability of any country due to it allowing effective economic utilization. What that means is even if you buy this entire contention on innovation and then link that to economy, creativity is going to be helpful, whereas intelligence is a necessity. But then secondly, I'd give you Santilli 24, which explains that a key aspect of achieving sustainable growth is making informed, forward-thinking decisions. Intelligence is needed for businesses. But then third, I'd give you Wilson et al. 14, which explains that intelligence has a direct impact on job performance, so individual economic standing comes from intelligence. Then let's go down to their contention 2 on progress. They tell you that knowledge creation only comes from creativity. This is a vast oversimplification. We can get knowledge through 3 facets. The first is observing and then understanding our world. That only requires intelligence. The second is extrapolating upon prior knowledge using reasoning. That is only intelligence. And the third is this creative ideation, which, as I tell you in my contention 1, even requires intelligence. But then secondly, on this idea of calculus, calculus is derived from our world. That's understanding. Then let's look to their subpoint B about the learning process. I tell you mistakes are failed application of intelligence, first of all. And second of all, learning from a mistake is intelligence. So the only impact of learning will always be on the negation, because we both define intelligence as learning. That means that my case stands and my opponent's falls, thus vote negation. Thank you.
Ready for cross?
Yep.
Okay, time begins on my first word. Great, let's go over to my contention 1. On this you say that implementation only comes through understanding of a problem. What good does understanding does a problem exist do if I cannot come up with a new solution to that existing problem?
I tell you, first of all, that at the top of case, and this is something you never refuted, is the idea that problem solving will progress us through the acquisition of knowledge, which means that we can still have a non-stagnant society without creativity.
Great.
But then secondly, I tell you that real-world needs and understanding of those real-world needs is the only way that we get application, and since we both agree that the round is premised on impacts in your observation and in mine, then that's going to be the most important thing to assess.
Great, you can have a question.
All right. So in my response to your response to my contention 2 about how intelligence is needed for humanity, my subpoint A about people, you basically say that babies don't have a high level of intelligence, but they're still able to survive. Can babies learn?
Great. So the argument we're making here is, again, we've made the argument that the learning process is inherently creative. Even if babies learn, it is because they make mistakes. You say that making mistakes is the application of knowledge that is failed. If a baby touches a sharp object, they are not applying knowledge because they don't have the knowledge to apply. They learn from that because they make that mistake in the first place. But that mistake is entropy, it is randomness, and that is what we have proven through our subpoint of the learning process. May I have a question?
Sure.
Great. In your last speech, you made the claim that intelligence gives application. What do you have to apply without a creative solution?
Once again, as I stated in rebuttal, we're going to get knowledge through 3 different ways. The first is going to be observation, understanding, and then learning. That's that whole example where the baby touches a sharp object. Now they understand that that sharp object is going to cause them pain. That's intelligent understanding and learning, which was in both of our definitions of intelligence. But then secondly, I tell you that we can extrapolate upon prior knowledge only using reasoning, and that comes from deduction, induction, therefore intelligence. And then the third is going to be this creative ideation and imagination, but even that requires intelligence insofar as my contention 1 stands. May I have a question?
Go ahead.
Sure. Okay, so how are mistakes creative?
Great. Mistakes are creative because, again, they are entropy. You may come up here and claim that mistakes are the application of failed knowledge. But again, Judge, the only impact we get from the learning process is because of mistakes. With the example of the baby touching the sharp object, the only claim my opponent makes is that once they touch the sharp object, they identified that that is sharp and that's a problem. The claim that we are making is that without touching the sharp object, they have nothing to learn. The learning process doesn't exist without mistakes, and mistakes are creative because they are changed, they are random, and there's no intelligence to base them off of.
All right.
Great. I have taken 15 seconds. I have 2 minutes 45. Running prep starts now. 20 seconds used is the official timekeeper. Good with that? Great. Off-time roadmap is going to be going over the affirmations case, then the negations case. Is anybody not ready? Then time begins on my first word. Judges, let's first go over the framework again. My opponent says that we need to evaluate the origin and the impact in this debate. We tell you that the origin does not matter because they have failed to provide a definition for the term force. We provide the definition that a force is the cause of change or motion, meaning that if you are evaluating any impact that a force has, you're evaluating what causes the change or motion. And in this debate, it is clearly creativity. Let's go to my contention 1. My opponent says that implementation only comes through understanding. You need understanding of an idea for innovation to occur. To this, we claim that if you have understanding of how something works, that does not mean you have a solution. We again propose you the idea of linear and lateral thinking. Linear thinking is what happens when you see a world where intelligence is a more powerful force. Linear thinking is drawing upon the same knowledge over and over and over again. You get nothing new, because there is nothing new to create a solution to solve the problem. But in a world where creativity is the more powerful force, it is not the implementation that matters. It is the solution, because that is the cause of the initial change. That is what we are saying. Implementation has no effect without a solution to implement. Next, they say that creativity is helpful while intelligence is necessary. We've proven to you that creativity is necessary for intelligence to have any new impact on the world. Otherwise, you're living in a stagnant society. Next, they say that jobs are based on individual intelligence. We're not arguing that. We're arguing that when the economy crashes, which we've proven through the fact that creativity drives it, jobs will then go into, people won't have jobs. That's when we will have that. Next, on the contention 2, they say that understanding is intelligence. We've proven to you that understanding a problem isn't enough. You need to come up with a creative solution. Just because I know that something is bad doesn't mean I can actually go fix it until I come up with a solution. On the example of the baby, again, that is the easiest example of the learning process you can see. It is the inherently most basic form of humans in society that you can evaluate. And in that situation, babies don't have the intelligence to make make that mistake. They don't have intelligence to apply to make the mistake like my opponent is claiming. They make the mistake. That's a creative thought. That is entropy. That is randomness. And through that randomness, even if they learn, they have nothing to learn without randomness. Next, we move on to their contentions. They say that on their contention, when we need to understand problems, you can cross-apply the response that understanding isn't enough and solutions are what is important. Next, they say on their subpoint B that on their contention to subpoint B that intelligence gives understanding of others. Again, we've proven to you that just understanding doesn't give you a solution. The entire premise of their argument is that understanding is key. We have proven to you that understanding has no impact. It is not a force, because a force is a cause of motion or change. In the negation world, you acquire the same knowledge and apply the same knowledge. You have stagnancy. In the affirmation world, you apply new things. You have evolution. Thus, we affirm.
And then I'll begin running prep beginning now. All right, for a quick off-time wrap-up, this will be over my opponent's case and what they shouldn't be able to extend into voter speech, and then over my own and weighing it. Great. Is anybody not ready? Then my time begins in 3, 2, 1. To start on framing, my opponent tells you that the prerequisite debate doesn't matter because we look to impact, but then they immediately go on to say that the initial cause is the most important. Make them choose. They can't say on one hand the initial cause is more important and then on the other hand it isn't. We need to look to the initial cause and the impact. Both will come primarily from intelligence. Then on their case, their contention one about creative economy, they never respond to this Wilson et al. 14 card, which tells you that intelligence is going to empirically lead to innovation. That is extremely important because that is the only actual empirics that you have in the round to link either force to innovation. But then on implementation, they tell you this doesn't matter, but insofar as in order to have an impact upon society, you need implementation. That is why it does matter. But even if you don't buy either of those, remember that the entire economy, which is their entire impact here, relies on intelligence. They don't address that. Then on their contention too about progress, they tell you mistakes are random, but then they try to tell you that that's a creative process. If they're random, they're just interacting with their environment in random ways and then learning how to interact better. That is going to always be intelligence. And remember that both of our definitions of intelligence include learning. Neither of our definitions of creativity do. Then let's go over to my case. Remember that they never address the idea once again in consolidation that we weigh under scope of influence. Let's go into why that matters. In my contention 1, I tell you intelligence is needed for creativity. They tell you understanding is stagnant, so it doesn't matter. But insofar as they never address the idea that we can extrapolate upon prior knowledge using reasoning, which is definitionally intelligence, we can still gain and acquiesce knowledge without creativity. Creativity is not fundamental to knowledge in the same way intelligence is. But then, the reason that this point is going to matter is because of scope of influence. Insofar as intelligence provides for both its own impacts and creative impacts, it's always going to have the greater scope of influence, thus the greater power, and that is a clean negation ballot. Then, let's go down to my contention 2 about how intelligence is needed for humanity, then my subpoint A about people. Once again, they try to extend this cross-application that society is stagnant without creativity. Insofar as I just disproved that, let's go into why this point matters. The ability to know how to influence others is going to link directly to power in today's round. So is the ability to communicate, and the ability to survive is the origin cause for any human impact. And then on my subpoint B about societies, I tell you, you functionally can't have humans coming together in a society without intelligence. That means that the greatest influence upon the greatest many is always going to fall to intelligence, and thus I urge a negation ballot. Thank you.
I will be taking running prep time starting now. Prep ceased at 34 seconds. Off-time roadmap will be an overview, key voters, and what you are going to weigh this round on. Is anybody not ready? Time will begin on my first word. A society sans creativity stays stagnant. In this round, you are going to evaluate which force impacts society the most. Again, extend the definition of force as the cause of motion or change. That is the key way that you are going to vote in today's round, and that vote will end up with the affirmative. First, let's go over my contention 1. My opponent says that any impact on society needs intelligence. Again, we've given you the example that a human, a singular human, is still a part of society. Whether or not that actual solution gets applied does not matter, because we are looking at, again, the cause of motion or change. And so long as that definition stands and the cause of motion or change is creativity, i.e. that creative idea, then we easily win this argument, because that creative idea causes motion or change. Whether that change stays with one person or is applied does not matter, because we are looking at the cause. Next, let's move on to my opponent's second point against this, talking about how the impact on society needs intelligence and how we can extrapolate on past intelligence. First, to this we say that they have neglected to address the fact that creativity is, again, lateral thinking. It is using old knowledge to create new solutions. You can extend this argument because this is key. You need new solutions to existing problems. Again, we give you the example of climate change, which goes non-addressed. Just because you identify that climate change is a problem doesn't matter until you fix it, meaning that coming up with a creative solution to this is the only way to mitigate anything and coming up with new solutions to old problems. Next, let's move on to my contention 2. To this, they say that randomness isn't creative. We've given you evidence from Rothenberg 19 talking about how creative people have an orientation to error that is out of the ordinary. And additionally, we've given you evidence saying that the way people deal with errors and mistakes is inherently creative. Also, the argument we're making here is completely misunderstood. We're saying that if you want to learn, even if the learning process is intelligent, you need to make mistakes, and mistakes are creative. Therefore, you can't learn without making mistakes. Progress does not exist without making mistakes. Next, they say that intelligence provides for all creative impacts. To this, we say, again, no, because that impact is still an impact even if it stays with one person. You are voting on the cause of motion or change, proving that the cause is creativity because it is that creative idea that causes the change, whether it stays with one person or spreads. On their case, all they say is that in 1, intelligence provides for creative impacts. 2, intelligence is a prerequisite. We've proven to you that prerequisites don't matter. We're looking at what is a greater force, i.e. cause of motion or change, definition only one that has been extended. Meaning that in this debate, what is the cause of motion or change? Creativity, that creative idea, that solution. And that's what you're voting on. Finally, they say that societies need intelligence, but fail to provide how. Just because a society can communicate, first of all, and we've proven to you that language is a creative idea, doesn't mean that it is actually going to progress. Evolution and progress is creative. You're voting today for a society in which humans live, not just survive. Thank you.
Running prep starting now. All right, and then I'll end prep there. And then for a quick off-time roadmap, this will just be going once more over my opponent's side of the flow and then moving into 2 voting issues. Great. Is anybody not ready? Then my time begins in 3, 2, 1. Once again on framing, my opponent still hasn't chosen whether the initial impact matters or the implementation matters. Because on their contention 1 about innovation, they tell you on this extension of this climate change issue that you need to be able to fix it for it to have an impact. That is implementation, which they concede is intelligence throughout this round. Then, they still never address this Wilson et al. 14 card, which I've extended since rebuttal, which tells you that there's an empirical link between intelligence and innovation. That is the only empirical link that you have in today's round to innovation. But even if you don't buy that, once again, something they've never responded to is the idea that the economy entirely rests on intelligence. That's that Awalda 22 card. That means, at best, their entire impact still flows through the negation. Then, onto their contention 2 about progress. They tell you that mistakes are random, but then somehow that's still creativity. Randomness is not creativity. Creativity is a cognitive function. I've continued to uphold that in today's round. They give you no warranting as to why randomness is going to be creativity. But what we do both agree on is that the learning process is going to be intelligence. So the entire impact here is inherently a negation ballot because learning is going to come from intelligence. Now on to 2 key voting issues. The first is that intelligence is needed for creativity. I tell you, you need the skills for information intake, perception, attention, memory, language, and planning, and you need the psychological condition of intelligence to have creativity. They tell you the prerequisite doesn't matter, but then they also tell you the origin matters throughout every single speech they make. The origin does matter here as well as the implementation. But then they tell you that you can still have the idea in a single person, but insofar as that's not the greatest scope of influence, which we agreed we're weighing under in today's round because they functionally didn't respond to that, and then that single person doesn't even interact with my psychological condition argument, you still can't have the single person having this creative idea without the psychological condition of intelligence, insofar as this is true. The scope of influence for intelligence will always be greater than the scope of influence for creativity because intelligence provides for its own impacts and for creative impacts. The second voting issue is going to be that intelligence has the greatest influence over the greatest many. This is where you turn economy into and learning. They only extend the response that a single human is still going to be powerful if they have their idea, but first of all, they can't have the idea, and second of all, the scope of influence will always be greater upon a society. So survival, emotional intelligence, communication, which they give you a response to in their voter speech, that's not something you extend, is going to always allow for this basis of influence. Thus, the scope of influence for intelligence will always be greater because of these 2 arguments. That means intelligence has a greater power in today's round. I answer to you the big question, and I still urge a negation ballot. Thank you. Good one.
At this time, I would like to introduce you to all the 2 finalists. On the affirmative, Code 204, Harini Arun, representing the state of Arizona, coached by Norman Rumsey and Miranda Vega. On the negative, Code 223, Caleb Waldron, representing the state of Colorado, coached by Patrick DeMartine and Petit. Thank you to the John Templeton Foundation for sponsoring the Centennial 2025 National Speech and Debate Association's Big Questions Debate. Good luck and good night to all from Des Moines.
Left. At this time, would you please welcome to the stage the finalists of Big Questions Debate presented by the John Templeton Foundation. Tonight, we recognize the top 4 teams in Big Questions, a debate format supported by a grant from the John Templeton Foundation. This year, students have grappled with complex worldview questions as they debate both sides of the topic. Resolved creativity is a more powerful force than intelligence. That, again, was the topic. Thanks to the generosity of the John Templeton Foundation, the NSDA has given over $1.5 million to speech and debate programs since 2016, while creating opportunities for students to debate topics at the intersection of science and philosophy. Your winners in the 2025 Big Questions Debate are the semifinalist receiving a $1,250 scholarship from the John Templeton Foundation is Nathaniel Cortopassi from the Wasatch High School in Utah, coached by Ashley Painter. The semifinalist receiving a $1,250 scholarship from the John Templeton Foundation is Hudson Turman from Tascosa in Texas, coached by Ryan Lovell and Heather Soltero. Placing second and receiving a $2,500 scholarship from the John Templeton Foundation is Harini Arun from Arizona College Prep High School in Arizona, coached by Miranda Vega and Norman Rumsey. And your champion, receiving a $5,000 scholarship from the John Templeton Foundation and winning with a 5-4 decision on the negative, Caleb Waldron from Loveland High School in Colorado, coached by Patrick DeMartine, Deena, Petit, and Josh Kascak. Please welcome to the stage the finalists and informative speakers.